Hello, welcome back. We're ready to start.
Yes. Yes, we are.
Okay.
Mhm.
And we'll finish in about 35 minutes.
I thought we have another hour and 10 minutes. That's
You
how it.
wanted to finish at 10:30.
No, I think 10:30. Now it's 9 o'clock in.
Ah, okay.
Yeah,
All right.
okay.
Okay, um, all right. So picking up where we left off, we were discussing how the city of Cain led to the city of Nimrod. That there was a purpose in these cities. That they were providing for the welfare of people. But it was limited because the underlying tension from Cain's murder of Abel is that it left Cain estranged from God. Cain could not take responsibility for the keeping of his brother. And so in building a city, he was able to solve, or he was able to overrule a lot of the curse, but he was not able to reconnect with God. So we would do well to replace that idea of God of God being a being with the idea of human rights. Being your brother's keeper. And that's so we see the end of that, of Cain's city under Lamech, being just becoming more violent than the original sin. Because there was a tension that wasn't resolved. That's the seed of cities and governments that are sown on the earth. And the idea is that there is a city of God and a city of men. And they are to remain separate. So when we come down to the city of Babel and we consider its origins, we can see that the consequences of the flood necessitate a mighty hunter. Not only for the provision of food, but for the protection of people from wild animals. And so Nimrod is going to establish himself. That's the story of Babel is not in Genesis chapter 10. Because Genesis 10 doesn't mention a tower. So Nimrod is a king and a city builder. He's ruling in Shinar, the same region as Babel. And so traditionally, we tie him in with Genesis chapter 11. And what are the people saying in chapter 11? They want to make themselves a name because they don't want to be scattered across the earth. So I would like to suggest that the problem here isn't the city. The problem is the tower. Because what does the tower represent? They want to make themselves a name. That tower represents self-glorification. Their name. It represents security through unity. Because they don't want to be scattered. It represents human pride and independence from God. And what are we going to do when we see God? That word God. They're not going to consider human rights. So Nimrod isn't named here, but it's clear that he did rule and this was his capital. And what Nimrod represents is centralized human power. He was the first great post-flood empire builder. And what he did is he combined political power and pride. Political power on its own is not the problem. Combine it with this pride, and you have dangerous human power. So what he wanted, or what they wanted, was greatness without God. And what do we do when we see the word God? Human rights. So if you take your mind back to Romans chapter 13, remember Paul said that the governments aren't a terror to good works. What's a good work that somebody in a country would do? So here we celebrate Australia Day on January 26. Well, some people do, our Indigenous people don't, which is understandable. But they give out what's called Australia Day Awards. So people that do good works get rewarded. What are their good works? What would they all have in common? Yes, some kind of helpful community. It's always something that is done on behalf of others. It doesn't matter if people are working for disability or soup kitchen. If they've made advances in sciences, those good works are always something that is done for other people. There's never anything rewarded for somebody who's just done something for themselves. And this is the difference between this pride of Babel and the sorry, so this is what is at war with this pride of Babel, I should probably say. That greatness can be at the cost of other people. So Babel becomes a symbol of human power that's opposed to God. Or human power that is at odds with human rights. So Nimrod becomes the first empire builder. And is the prototype of a tyrant. So this this tower, that is in this city, it represents the ideology of this government. of self-glorification. So any thoughts or comments on Genesis chapter 11? So from Babel, this will thread its way through history till we get to Babylon. And whether we follow it through the image of Daniel 2, because that whole image really represents Babylon, that goes through different phases. So it starts with literal Babylon and ends with spiritual Babylon. We could look at each of those kingdoms in the same light. That those kingdoms start with good intentions. But they start with a tension that doesn't get resolved. The ultimate end of that kingdom will be despotism, that brings about its fall. And so the same when we come to modern Babylon. The problem we got ourselves into with regarding modern Babylon is that we couldn't get past it not being the papacy. So we saw the mystery of iniquity back in Genesis Genesis 6. When there was this unholy alliance between the sons of God and the daughters of men. And we, as Adventists, transferred that thought to the fifth kingdom of Bible prophecy. To the fifth kingdom of Bible prophecy, to the papacy. And we couldn't see past that. But with the fall of the papacy in 1798, that baton went to the next kingdom. And what Revelation 17 is going to reveal is something that's not clearly seen in the previous kingdoms. And that is that a kingdom can be built with good intentions, and then can ultimately fall because there is unresolved tension. What can begin for the protection and provision of people ends in self-glorification and the treading down of that people. And that's what happens when you leave God or human rights out of the equation. Human pride or imperial arrogance takes control. Leaders want to make a name for themselves by claiming divine status. And we see this in literal Babylon with Daniel chapter 3. And we see that at the end of the world. So my purpose in going through this history of cities and kingdoms is to show how they can start with good motives. But they can't last forever because of unresolved problems. So if we go to the sixth kingdom of Bible prophecy, I want to look at an article that was put on the media broadcast last year. Fifteenth of the 3rd, 2025. And it's called Trump's Rise Marks the End of a long progressive era in the United States. It's written by Edward Price. And I'm just going to stop sharing this screen. Not that one, sorry. Oh, this one. And how do I do that? Oh. Can I share from this page? Sorry, from my laptop.
Do you want to share from your computer?
Yes, how do I go about doing that?
You go to Do you have a arrow share on the bottom?
Yes, so what's happening is my laptop is being shared. I need to swap.
Uh, it says, okay. Isn't it your tablet that is being shared now? I thought it's your tablet that we have a share screen now.
Yes,
Your
and I
screen.
need to share from my laptop, not from my tablet. Stop
Okay.
share.
Uh-huh.
Ah, okay. I think that's.
Okay. So now you can share from your laptop. Yes.
And you can see that article.
Yes.
Very good. So this was an article that I also shared in a presentation last year. But I can't remember which one. But it was in the media broadcast in March. And I think it would do well to reread it to understand what's happened in the Sixth Kingdom. So there's an image here of Trump addressing the joint session of Congress on March 4. And this article was written the next day. President Donald Trump pledged in his address to Congress Tuesday night to make the US the most dominant civilization ever to exist on the face of this earth. What exactly is he striving for? It may have been a throwaway line in a ceremonial speech, but after all, this is the president who insists he wants to absorb Canada and Greenland. Oh, okay. I'll paraphrase. Yes. Okay, so Trump is addressing the joint session of Congress. So if you look at the picture, you'll see all those with red ties in front of him. And we don't see the full room, but so there are Republicans and Democrats. If you see a red tie, it's a Republican. On your bottom right there, you'll see the Supreme Court justices. So he said to this joint session that he wants to make the United States the most dominant civilization ever to exist on the face of this earth. And the writer is asking, what does that mean? What exactly does he want? So what he wants is to remove all the progressive aspects that the United States has had since the 1700s. So he wants, I'm just trying to think of the proper word here, centralized power. So what did the Sixth Kingdom not have? It did not have centralized power. It was not able to fully regulate industry, but it made a good attempt. And it did try to maintain human rights. So what does Trump want? He wants to totally regulate industry and curtail these varied rights. Cut back. So how is he able to do this and smile at the same time? And the author is going to take us back to the very beginning of the United States. To its beginning as a state. And he's going to show that there was a tension right at the beginning of its inception. The Declaration of Independence was given in 1776. What did that mean? It's this people saying we are rejecting the King of England. They're defying English law. Now, this is at odds with Romans chapter 13. Where the people are to recognize the authority of the state. But what had that state or the King of England been doing? It had trod down their human rights. And this is going to result in revolution. The people are going to defy the king, the authority that was over them. But now they've got a problem. Because you can't just get rid of authority, you need to replace it. Because if you want to keep human rights, then you've got to move away from that idea of rejecting a government. And create another government. That other government was the creation of a constitution in 1789. You're going to create an American law and demand that the people obey it. So you see this tension. Be lawless, defy the king. Be lawful, create another law and obey the government. Now, Republicans are very conservative. They really believe in obeying or following the law. So this contrast here, this tension is hard for Republicans to get their head around. And it's going to be a problem for them. The United States that you see today was born in the 1780s. When leading men got together and wrote a constitution. So that's the state, the government. But the nation or the culture of the people that powers that state, it was born earlier than that. The nation was born from people who were angry. So the nation was born by people who broke the law. America had to break the law and then make another law. And what the Sixth Kingdom was able to do was reconcile those two things. Fuse, bring together. You've got two contrasting thoughts. Rebelliousness and law keeping. The rebelliousness that deposed a king, and the law abiding that created a constitution. So what the Sixth Kingdom did was it took the spirit of 1776, which was the Declaration of Independence, and the law of 1789, which was the Constitution, and fuse them or bring them together. So people could have their freedom and yet still be under law. But they never were able to deal with that underlying tension completely. Their progressiveness was limited. And what Trump has been able to do is, you may have heard the expression, Trump is not the cause of what is happening now. He's not the cause of this current situation in US politics. He is the symptom. He is the result. And what he is doing is he is splitting 1776 and 1789 apart. He has taken hold of that rebellious spirit of 1776. He has taken hold, he has harnessed the rebellious spirit of 1776. That spirit that says we don't have to listen to a king. And he is using that spirit to defy the law of the Constitution of 1789. He doesn't have to get rid of that Constitution. He doesn't have to change the law. But he can just roll back the progressions that have been made by harnessing that rebellious spirit. The writer will go on to explain that it hasn't all been progression. There was a lot of good things that happened under the Sixth Kingdom. And he'll list the major steps. The freeing of the slaves, women getting the vote, creating a welfare safety net for the people, the civil rights of the 1960s, these were all progressive. I might skip that. So even the United States aggression, so when it went to war, they had good intentions. They wanted democracy in Iraq. But why Trump has been able to succeed is recognizing that the United States is essentially conservative. Even though it was governed by a progressive entity. So notice the wording of that paragraph. The ideology under the Sixth Kingdom is progressiveness. But Trump is able to create a beast by replacing that ideology. There's been a lot of outcry against Trump. Because there are many that would just like the United States to stay progressive. But what the writer is recognized is that the way a country behaves and what is at its best interest are separate things. So a government, when it wants to pursue good things for the country, it should be amoral. And what does it mean to be amoral? I'll get a proper dictionary meaning for you. So indifferent to morality. So what he's talking about here is the separation of church and state. But when he's referring to the church here, he's talking about morality. But you can't have progress separate from morality. If you go through the list of progressive steps that we just read, the abolishment of slavery, the civil rights, women voting, the government providing welfare where needed, they are moral issues. And that's why the writer says that there can be no separation of church and state when it comes to the ideology of progress. There has to be a moral element for that nation to do good to its people. So what Trump is doing is addressing that issue of church and state. He wants to create a smaller yet more powerful state. So this is the building of a tower. It is the centralizing of human power. And what that will ultimately do is it will cut back its progressive ability. It won't be able to improve its human rights. So Elon Musk, when he was working for Doge, was cutting back funding for some very important institutions. For example, the Department of Education. The problem with the Department of Education is that it is a progressive institution. So you can't just fiddle with it. Fiddle, tinker. You can't just play around with it. From Trump's perspective and Elon Musk's perspective is you just need to get rid of it. And so they are one by one wanting to get rid of these progressive institutions. And what the author is highlighting is it is this that will bring the United States to its end. It is these progressive institutions that was the I guess the hallmark of the Sixth Kingdom. But the tension that was there at the beginning of this nation that rebelliousness against the law, that libertarianism, that we can do what we want regardless of how it affects others, was never fully dealt with. And that was what ultimately brought the downfall of the Sixth Kingdom. And what these kingdoms of Revelation 17 reveal to us is that we can have a kingdom that is not controlled by a bad ideology, that does not become a beast. But if we look closely at all the kingdoms of Bible prophecy, that's how they all began. We don't need to see the history of all the kingdoms that went before us. It is enough to see their behavior as the king of the north. But it is essential to understand that transfer of power in our own time. How the Sixth Kingdom can be a kingdom of Bible prophecy and yet not be the king of the north. Not be a bad woman riding a beast. That it can have an ideology that at its core wants to protect and defend human rights, but that ultimately fails because it is relying on human systems to solve all of humanity's problems. And a human system can never be sufficient to do that. So the institutions that were created were not strengthened enough in that time period. And Trump is able to harness that populist spirit of 1776 to not only bring down the Sixth Kingdom, but to create his own tower. So I know that won't answer all your questions, but I just wanted to take us back to the beginning of the kingdoms of Bible prophecy. Way back to the first city. And to see the pros and cons of that city and government. That it had an ideology, but that ideology gets replaced because it was lacking. So any thoughts or questions?
Já mám možná takovou otázku, jestli tedy můžeme říct, že určitým způsobem bylo šelmou dříve, než na ní usedla ta žena.
Ešte raz, Peťo, nebolo ťa počuť. Nebolo ťa počuť, Peťo, ešte raz.
No, teď mě je slyšet?
Áno.
Já bych se chtěl zeptat, jestli z toho všeho vyplývá, že to šesté království už tedy bylo určitým způsobem tou šelmou dříve, než na něj usedá ta žena. Jestli to byla už určitá forma jako šelmy.
Peter is asking if we can look at this seventh kingdom as that it already was a bit
Šesté.
before the woman sit on it.
Šestého království.
The sixth kingdom. Can we look at it as at the beast from a certain point?
So if we where would we mark the Sixth Kingdom as its beginning?
V 1798.
1798.
So 1798 is the beginning of the Sixth Kingdom. But we also understand that, so we talked about 1776 and 1789. The rebelliousness of 1776 and the lawfulness of 1789. So 1776, we're not obeying the law. $17.89, we're creating a law we want you to obey. There's a tension between those two thoughts. 1798 onwards is where we mark the sixth kingdom. But that tension is going to remain. Until we get to 1989. And we're going to start to see the rise of the seventh kingdom. So sixth kingdom, no beast. Seventh kingdom, rise of a beast. But the sixth kingdom is still there, in control. We know that we mark 2021 to Sunday law. We say rise of the seventh, fall of the sixth. But we know the seventh is starting to rise from 1989. It just has more visibility in 2021. We see this, only see the seventh kingdom in 1989 with the eye of faith. From 2021, it's really visible. But we could go back to 1798 and walk through this history. And the tension is there that will create the seventh kingdom. It is not in control. And there is no beast. Here we're seeing, we know Sunday law on, now we have a beast. But from 1989 to Sunday law, the sixth and seventh are in open tension. The seventh kingdom's ideology has not gone away. Because it is the ideology of Babylon. It's going to be simmering under the surface from 1798. But it can't control the entity, the government, the seat. Does that help?
Děkuji moc. Thank you.
He says thank you.
No worries. Any other questions? So totally separate to this is the story of the woman of Revelation 12.
Yes, that was my question. How is it connected? The woman from Revelation 12 with the sixth kingdom.
So Acts 27 tells the story of two ships. So what I've written above is the story of the United States. We could draw another line where we're talking about the church. And how the church from 1798 is going through its 5th, 6th, and 7th phase of the Christian dispensation. (1798) marking who or what church?
Sardi.
Yeah, let's go Sardis,
Right.
Philadelphia, and Laodicea. And we know that they overlap contemporary. Laodicea is going to continue through 1989. But we are also going to mark the rise of Ephesus. So this top line is the story of Jezebel. So so we'll go Jezebel in hiding. Church is visible. Before that, church is in hiding. Jezebel is visible. Two separate women. And so we can't confuse the good woman of Revelation 12 with a good ideology of the sixth kingdom. So some have referred to this ideology of the sixth kingdom as a good woman. Because it's a good ideology. But it is not the good woman of Revelation 12. It's not Sardis, Philadelphia, Laodicea, or Ephesus. So what we have from 1989 onwards is Jezebel coming back to the forefront. And so is Ephesus. Because we could also say that Laodicea has kind of been in hiding as well, but I don't want to be too confusing. It's certainly been in captivity for 126 years. So we need to keep those two women separate. And that whatever you call the ideology of the sixth kingdom, it is not the good woman of Revelation 12. And if you want to call it a good woman, that's fine. It's okay for a good ideology to be in control of a government. because that is what brought about abolition, civil rights, welfare, safety net for needy people. Was brought about by the ideology of the Sixth Kingdom. Our role as Ephesus is to pay our taxes, is to obey, is to be good citizens, and to watch the political maneuverings of the United States. Because they not only tell us where we are in history, it's also what's told us, it's also what's educated us on how to behave. Because we've created a prophetic understanding from a woman riding a beast. And a beast controlling a woman. And that which has brought us the message of equality. So we have just as much to learn about the political machinations of the nations as we do from understanding our own church history. So while we separate them, they are connected. Does that help? So let me answer a question that was written. When do we mark the good phase of the King of the North? And how does it differ from the bad phase? So I'd like to suggest that the Sixth Kingdom is not the King of the North. We'll mark the King of the North beginning in 1989, rising. There's no visible, the King of the North dies in 1798. So the King of the North is dead during the history of the Sixth Kingdom. The Sixth Kingdom is not the good phase of the King of the North. King of the North's got to get resurrected. Any other thoughts?
I had a similar question to what you just said. Like we are learning, and you also said it today, that each kingdom started out good. So these good phases of these kingdoms they are different to the sixth kingdom. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mhm.
So recently, I think it was Fiji, I did some history on ancient Rome, reviewed some history of ancient Rome. Rome doesn't come into prophetic history until Daniel 11:16. Oh, 14. Daniel 11:14. It existed for hundreds of years before then. As it was rising to prominence across the Mediterranean, it was it wanted to achieve national greatness. It wanted to provide more for its people. In doing that, it was expanding its territory. But actually believed it was doing good to the nations around them. When it conquered Macedon in the Battle of Pydna, it believed it was setting those Macedonians free. They would be free from their despotic king, and Rome would provide it with a better government. And it did. That's how it created empire. But then that did not last. And we see all the political chicanery around verses 16 and onwards. And Rome will become despotic. So we don't mark Rome as king of the north until verse 16. If we think back to ancient Egypt, the Egypt that wanted to, that enslaved God's people and wanted to kill them all, was the same Egypt years before that had welcomed them in as refugees. That had taken in Joseph to be prime minister. So Egypt wasn't a dragon back when Joseph was prime minister. But it becomes a dragon in the time of Moses. These nations started for all the reasons we wrote above. To give security, identity, and community. And their civilizations progress. But they always end in violence and the treading down of human rights. Because ultimately they are godless. Only the kingdom of God can create. Whoops. We think of these, we say these are Satan's kingdoms. But Satan is not a creator. He has no original thought. What he does is corrupt what already exists. And so these governments, cities, kingdoms, they get corrupted. But he didn't create them. Does that help? You think
Yes.
of Jeremiah, that has how God spoke through Jeremiah. How God uses these kingdoms. How God used Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel chapter 4. He removeth kings and setteth up kings. Egypt was ordained of God. Egypt was there to provide sustenance to God's people and protection when they needed it. That nation gets corrupted. God's people are trodden down. And the kingdoms start again. The kingdom falls, I should say.
So, can I have an additional question? So, all of these kingdoms, they start out as good. So what is the difference between the good that is the good face of the kingdom of the north and the sixth kingdom?
There is no good face of the kingdom of the north. Rome wasn't the kingdom of the north until verse 16 of Daniel 11. Before that, it's just another kingdom. The king of the north represents that stage of a kingdom where the bad ideology is running the government. Kingdoms, governments, they go through their own history before they become the king of the north. The king of the north is not a good phase. At any time, it's bad.
Maybe I misunderstood what Curtis meant, because I thought he was saying there is a good face of the King of the North. Maybe I misunderstood.
So I don't think we're at odds. But I know that Rome wasn't the King of the North. The Rome had been around for hundreds of years before it became the King of the North. Same with all the kingdoms. I think studies were done in the past to show that the sixth kingdom and the seventh kingdom are there between 1798 and 1989. But there is no beast for that seventh kingdom to rise, or that King of the North to ride. The tension is there. It's not smooth sailing for the sixth kingdom. It's got to fight for these progressive steps. And sometimes it doesn't fight hard enough, strong enough. So I think we were saying the same thing. I stand to be corrected.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you for today. I know it's getting late for you. I want to thank you for all your questions. While we didn't go through them, one by one, I hope we could clear some thoughts up. So we'll close in prayer.
Thank you, Elder Terrie.
Thank you.
Our loving God in heaven, as we look down through the ages of human history, so much suffering, not just human beings, but this planet, your creation. It won't be long and we'll be able to see the end of all of this. But we know we need to learn the mistakes of the past. How you expect us to behave with everything that's going on around us. Our relationship to government, our relationship to the governing of this movement. The treatment of each other. We are our fellow human beings' keeper. We know that this church of Ephesus is being built upon these solid promises. That your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. We pray for greater understanding of these things, prophetically and personally. I thank you for the members of Slovakia, for their deep thinking, for their lack of pride, Lord, that they can come with every question. Seeking and digging deeper. Without that, we wouldn't be where we are. Bless them as they continue to fellowship over the Sabbath. And for us here as our studies begin at home. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.